The polling.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pam McFarlane. I'm a member of the GBBA events team, and I'm also the Atlantic manager of the Atlantic marketing manager of Altus Group. Welcome to the first Greater Burnside Business Association webinar for 2022. It's a very timely topic today, the property tax appeal process, as property owners in Nova Scotia should have received or will soon receive their 2022 assessments all throughout Nova Scotia. So I will now turn the mic over to James Lindsay, the moderator for today's webinar. Good afternoon, James.
Thanks so much, Pam. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say a big welcome to all the Greater Burnside Business Association members. I know these are kind of tough times for everybody. You know, for a lot of us, I think it's like -15 out there. So for all those guys with the bald heads, you know what it's like. We're kind of freezing our old bald heads off. But good to really see that you guys are all coming out, and it's going to be a really great presentation today. We have about a jam-packed hour of exciting material surrounding property tax information for the HRM and the province, and how that's going to be handled in regards to COVID-19 implications. There are just a couple ground rules that I did want to cover just kind of before we get started. One, there is quite a bit of material being covered, so if anyone has any questions or wants a copy of the slide deck, feel free to reach out. Also, in addition, the wonderful Pam McFarlane, who was just speaking before, will be keeping track of all incoming questions. We do ask that you post those into the designated Q&A box. So you should see that at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a message box and then a Q&A. Just make sure to click on that Q&A box, and we will try and get those questions as soon as we can. In regards to those, there's going to be two periods that we can talk about questions. One just in the middle gives you a quick break, and then we'll have a quick poll as well. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll have questions as well. If we do run out of time at any point or anyone has any additional questions, please do not hesitate to give any one of us a call. Reach out to us on LinkedIn or via the emails in the presentation. Be happy to talk to you. So without further ado, today's presenters today will be myself. I will be moderating, and then my colleague Mathieu Maillet will be presenting, as well as Navin, Ramesh. In regards to the presentation today, our first presenter will be Navin Ramesh, and he'll be covering the 2022 assessment cycle, value trends, as well as a base state date conversation. So quite a really great things to kind of come up at a great time. I think all of you should have got your notices by now. So really some good information coming from Navin. Navin is a new hire within our Atlantic property tax team. He started back in August, so I guess not really a new hire if you think about it, but he each and every day he shows why he's been such a great hire. Navin comes to Altus with a wealth of education, having completed a bachelor's of engineering degree in India, a stint with the planning department in Dubai, as well as now I completed an MBA at the Sobey School of Business in Halifax. Little known fact about Navin, he's still getting accustomed to all types of cuisine in Halifax. So if you ever have any suggestions, feel free to send them along. Trust me, seeing somebody react to eating a type of food for the first time, it's got to be up there for one of the top things there. So really going to be some great stuff coming here from Navin. After Navin, we'll take a quick break to answer any questions and continue with my colleague Mathieu Maillet. Mathieu has over 25 years in the property tax and assessment world. He is a father, husband, and a phenomenal leader of our humble Atlantic tax group. Mathieu will be covering the last bulk of the presentation regarding assessed value trends for 2022, COVID-19 considerations, as well as property tax changes coming to the HRM. So some really important stuff. There's going to be a lot of information in there, but I'd really watch and see what's happening, because it can really affect your bottom line. GBA members will get an inside track of what the municipal and provincial governments have in store for 2022. Oh, and fun quick fact about Mathieu, he is an avid motorcyclist. So yes, if you're sitting in your office in Burnside and you hear a souped up moped flying by your office, yes, that most likely is him. So feel free to go outside and give him a quick wave. Last but certainly not least, by my standards, of course, will be yours truly, who will try and keep the flow of things moving. Be warned, I'm a talker, as you probably just saw about this introduction. So if we do go over a little bit, I apologize for you guys. Just you know, it's kind of how these Zoom webinars go. I have just about 5 years of property tax experience. I started in Calgary, and then I moved over to the Nova Scotia side. I think how a lot of people kind of feel it is you like the mountains, but there's nothing better than the ocean, right? So you move over here. And fun fact about me, I live on the best side of the bridge. That's the Dartmouth side. That's the GBBA side. So I just wanted to let you know that your moderator is representing and is here to serve you well. Just a quick little agenda to get started. So as I noted, Navin will be talking again about that 2022 assessment cycle, and we'll get over to him now. So thank you, everybody, and I hope this presentation works well for you. And Navin, I'll pass the mic over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, James, for such a great introduction. And on behalf of Altus Group Property Tax team, I would like to welcome all the attendees today. As we go to the Nova Scotia assessment cycle, we would like to stress that it is highly time sensitive, and we would like to start with how the cycle works and what all the processes involved within the assessments. So starting with I would like to let you know all that the assessment cycle has already begun for the year 2022 by October 1, 2021, which is the advanced notification consultation period, during which professionals like us get in and have a begin conversation with the assessors to try and reduce the value. So the preliminary values are published during the period between October 1 and on October 1, and we'll have time until December 20th to have any conversations with the assessor to try and bring down the value. So then moving on, the base date for the 2022 assessment is Jan 1, 2021. This date is very critical because the properties are going to be assessed based on this date, the state of the property on this date. So, and then we have the state date, which is December 1, 2021. As we go further into the presentation, we will try and present more information about the base date and the state date and what's the difference between those. Next slide, please. Yeah, now with further moving into the timeline, we would like to address the most important period. Most of you might have already received your assessment notices for 2022. The PBSC published the assessed values on Jan 10, 2022, and we'll get a period of 31 days to appeal any notices, which falls on Feb 10, 2022. This period is very critical because if we are going to miss out on this deadline, the property owners are going to lose their ability to go and appeal the assessments. And PBSC issues financial requests to all income producing properties on somewhere around Feb 20s. And it is very important to make note of this data as well, because if the property owners are not going to stick to this deadline and comply with the request of submitting the financial data, be it income and expense statement or rent rolls or something similar to that. So PBSC issues these financial requests somewhere closer to Feb 20s. These financial data will be used to calculate the 2023 assessments. And the HRM issues all the interim tax bills for all real properties in Nova Scotia, on March 2022. Next slide, please. Yeah. The deadline for the payment of the interim tax bills will be April 30, 2022. And on September, somewhere closer to September or October 2022, HRM will be issuing the final tax bills. The preliminary assessment values for 2023 will be released somewhere between September to October 2022. And the deadline for the payment of the final tax bills will be October 31, 2022. Next slide, please. As discussed earlier, we would like to stress the dates as these are very critical in the assessments. So firstly, the base date, Jan 1st, 2021. It is important to note this date because finally we'll get a chance to realize the impact that COVID has had on all the businesses and its effects. The sole use of the financial data after the base date would not be accepted by the courts. The post facto sales information can be used, but with support from pre-facto sales. So moving on to the state date, the state date is the physical condition of the property as of December 1st, 2021. Now we will just open up the floor to the attendees if they have any questions.
Thanks so much, Navin. That was a great little outlook on the assessment timelines and base dates, state dates. We just did want to kind of tell everybody again, you know, it is a lot of information. And again, if there's anything ever that comes up, you're like, whoa, wait, what's a base date? What's a state date? We're here for you. We're happy to chat anytime. That's very easy. So we did come up with a poll. It should, let me see, I think I can actually, apologies everyone, let's see if I can launch this for you. I hope this is coming up with everybody. I'll be honest, it's my first time launching a poll here. Okay, perfect. So we just wanted to see if some of the participants will leave this open for about a minute or so. And just kind of, maybe everybody can see what happened. I know I have some friends that work on the industrial side, and their business is booming. And then, you know, obviously there's been some others that it is really hit. So, you know, it's just something really to watch for. So we'll leave that open just for a little bit. I think we've got just a few on there so far, but some really important information coming up, especially if you're like, man, I paid a lot of taxes last year. Am I going to pay more? That's something that's going to be covered soon. So we will close this off in just a minute or so.
Any questions that came up from the floor?
No, there are none in the chat at this time.
So we got no questions from the floor, but I know we did have a question that came up to us ahead of the webinar. So I did want to thank whoever sent that forward. It's a really great question. So maybe we can field this one to Mathieu, and he can kind of see what kind of comes here. So someone had sent a question regarding. Oh, first of all, sorry everybody. So the poll results here: 50% participated. Looks like we've kind of got a split thing here going. 56% said yes, COVID did negatively impact them, and then 44% said no, it did not. So the next slides that you see is going to really see how the assessment value side is looking at that. But one of the most important sides is when you're not the owner, you know, what do you do to rectify your taxes, or how do you deal with those? So a question that came through from the audience, or from somebody initially, was how can a tenant who is leasing a space under a triple net lease, that means that your taxes are payable to the landlord, go about seeking to have their realty taxes reduced when the process is controlled by the landlord. The landlord is under no incentive to appeal because the tenant is paying it. So Mathieu, would you be able to shine some light onto this question?
Yeah. Well, if you're a small business or you're in a big, large, multi-tenanted, like strip plaza or strip industrial space, and you're concerned about your taxes, like you're just paying, if your lease is triple net, you're just paying a proportionate share of the tax bill for the entire property. So there's not much incentive for you to appeal the assessment, even if you in Nova Scotia, you do have the right to appeal it, but you wouldn't have the right to all the financial information that the owners provide for the assessment, because that lies between the owner and PVSC. And you could probably be sympathetic that there's a lot of rental information from other tenants and financial information from the property that's private, that shouldn't be shared with individual tenants. So it'd be, although you have the legal right to appeal the entire assessment, let's say you have a large property and you get it down, the net impact to your small space, let's say you occupy 10% of it, will be sort of minimal. So it's, from my experience dealing with a lot of landlords, there's certainly are proactive in looking to reduce assessments for their tenants, because they get the pressure. See, for them, they're motivated to get the value down too, because if taxes are high, it keeps their ability to raise rents low, because the tenants usually look at the gross rent, what the total cost of occupancy are, while landlord looks at the net rent of what the net rent is, because the occupancy costs, they don't really make any money off that, right? So both parties are really motivated, and you do have the right to appeal as a tenant anyways. We do frequently appeal single tenant properties when a tenant occupies the entire property. And that's quite common, and usually the landlord gives us the okay and we can share the information because it's pretty simple. So hope that answers the question there, James.
Oh, that's great. I hope that answers that for everybody. And I'm sure if there's any comments or additional questions, again, feel free to throw those into the Q&A on the bottom of your screen. We did have one just come in while Mathieu is answering those questions. So thank you very much, Anne-Louise McKinnon. And excuse me if my pronunciation there was off at all. I just wanted to thank you for that question. So we've got a question here. Years ago, the state date was 2 years in arrears. When did this change to December 2021? Maybe you could provide some feedback or comments regarding that.
Yeah, well, it was in 2018 that the province changed it from the 2-year lag to a 1-year lag to try to be more current in valuation, and that's a good thing they did that, because if that policy remained, or that remained, we would not be dealing with COVID right now. We'd have to wait another year to deal with any impacts of COVID in your valuation. So it's best practice to have an assessment system that's more current. Most are always about a year out. Some in Western Canada are 6 months out, but a year out is what we typically see in the assessment jurisdiction across the country. And some provinces like Ontario now are almost 7 years out, and it's creating a lot of inequities in the taxation sheen there.
Okay. Well, thank you again for the audience for that question, and Mathieu, thank you for answering those questions. No, I think everybody really appreciates it. Next up, we'll get into some COVID-19 considerations. Mathieu Maillet will take the floor. Let me just see if I can get this moving again. There we go.
So in Nova Scotia, it's a pretty basic assessment system where the values are all based on an ad valorem system, where higher valued properties that are worth more, are valued higher. Properties that are valued lower are valued lower. It's pretty much a simple system that way. The municipality then charges a tax rate based on a percentage tax rate to that value, and then you get your tax bill. So if you have owner occupied property like a manufacturing plant or small restaurant or whatever, Those are usually valued on cost, where the assessor comes up with a replacement cost, takes out depreciation and other depreciation, adds land value, and that's your value. Typical one of the three approaches to valuation in appraisal theory. If you have investment real estate like a hotel, apartment building, office, multi-tenanted industrial, which is a large part of Burnside, that's valued on income, where the assessor establishes market rent, expenses, comes up with a net operating income, and capitalized net income with by like a market derived cap rate. And all of that is used using mass valuation, mass appraisal techniques and software. You can appreciate the province values 600,000+ accounts every year, including residential, that is also done through a mass appraisal model. They don't get it right on everything. Some end up higher maybe than they should be, some lower than they should be, and they all end up to some valuation. There's not when we appeal the value, we take a fine-tooth comb approach to it. All of us on our team, we're 6 of us, we're experts in trying to get that value the lowest possible it could be, based on our experience, our technology, sales information we have, case law database we have, and most importantly, our relationships with various assessment authorities and the assessment, and we know what to look for quickly on different asset types. A lot of people, like, first thing they look at when they look at their assessment, they compare themselves with others that are similar. Like, you'll probably do that on your house. You'll look at what other your neighbors are taxed at and try to argue that. It's a common thing people do. However, in Nova Scotia, that's not a basis for appeal. There is an equity provision, but it's more of a complex scheme where it's more of a relation between the assessment of your class of property, namely commercial, against all the market data of those sales in terms of an assessment to sale ratio. I won't bore you with those details, but you can't just compare your assessment with other properties on a per square foot or per price basis as a basis for appeal. If we were in Newfoundland or PEI in Atlantic Canada, we can do that, but not in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. Next slide, James. So these here are all the provinces that are colored, are all provinces where we'll be dealing with COVID in 2022. We already have experience, your team here in Atlantic Canada, James, myself and Navin, we have been dealing with COVID in New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland already. So we do have a lot of experience. We also draw from experience from our colleagues in British Columbia and Alberta, who have been dealing with COVID for over a year now. And this year is Manitoba and parts of Quebec, certain municipalities that are going to be dealing with COVID this year. Next slide there, James. So here I'm giving you a snapshot. The roll was just published Monday this week. It went up by about 8.7%, 124.6 billion in the province. If you look at the residential assessment, went up about 10.8%. Your commercial assessment, which is what we're focused on here today, only went up by 1.3%. Obviously, commercial properties have been impacted by COVID much more, negatively, while most of the residential tax base or properties have benefited from COVID. COVID really changed people's perception of their homes, residential property. There's a housing crisis, a lot of demand for multi-res, all of that. So that's been pushing values up quite a bit. On the multi-res side, has been happening before COVID, and COVID seemed to have created a lot of demand and price pressure, upward pressure on prices for residential, as you well all know. So the assessments are starting to come up to catch up to that, and that's why you're seeing those increase. I've highlighted here the commercial tax base. Again, it went up 1.28% over last year, and gives you a bit of a history of the change in assessment commercial tax base there, highlighted in red on the chart in front of you here. Not big surprise there. It went up by 1.28%. There is a lot of new construction too that's happening, so that contributes to all of that. But the increase this year nothing surprising in our view. It's pretty nominal from what you can see there. Here, we're giving you a bit of a snapshot of the by asset type, and we're basing this on the preliminary values that we've got published earlier or late last year that we started working on for our clients. So hospitality, your hotels, resorts, and all that sort of thing, they've been negatively impacted by COVID, obviously. So the assessment authority brought those down by about 25% across the board. Multi-res by our sample is up 9%, 1% for office, and up 5.5 on industrial, and retail pretty much stayed the same. So you can see that COVID is impacting more so hospitality, pretty obvious. Retail is impacted to some degree, not all retail, but some is to some degree. Industrial and multi-res have been benefiting before COVID. There was strong push upwards on value for those asset types, and COVID really accelerated all of that. Over the last 2 years, we've seen record transactions for those two asset types, and that is a lot of the assets that are in Burnside are industrial. So you probably heard in the media all kinds of transactions happening and lower vacancy, higher rents, etc. So quite a bit strong demand for that. So assessments naturally are going to catch up to that. Next slide, please. So here, in terms of what we do for you with COVID and valuations, and we're experts. We're a bit of a one-trick pony shop in that we do assessment appeals and that's it. Everything we do, all the other services relating to property taxes, but we specialize in trying to get your value down, and that's the only thing that we focus on. So we're becoming quite good at it. We know we've harnessed good relationship with the assessment authorities. We know what to look for. In hospitality, we like they all went down 25%. In New Brunswick, for example, we presented different valuation models, different way of looking at it to assessors. We were able to for some properties get that value even further down than the 25% by presenting different valuation models. And multi-res, we had some success on pre-roll by comparing more of the actuals of the property, of what it's doing compared to the mass appraisal model, and had some success that way. In office, our successes have been mostly on rents that have been we've been able to prove on one-off or on a one-on-one basis that they were overstated based on actuals and market data. So we've had some success there. Also with some properties on chronic vacancy. And industrial, limited success there. It's been sort of difficult to get some reductions there. However, we've had some success on rents and some properties. Just looking at what the value, the mass appraisal model kicks out and what we're able to successfully prove there. We've had some success with recoveries and whatnot on this asset type. And retail, obviously, we started to look at retail in Nova Scotia at pre-roll back in October, and we had a lot of success there from looking at the valuation model, and we find that we have to look at each property on an individual basis because it's sort of unique to each property. Some retail like pharmacies and whatnot, food anchored, they seem to be doing okay, but some others that are not anchored or have tenants that are suffering more from COVID, we're seeing more vacancy there, pressure on rents coming down. So we're able to to come up with some good arguments there on the retail side for sure. The next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about property tax reform that HRM has been talking about for some time. Going back to the early 2000s, a lot of committees were struck. The city's trying to help small business with property taxes. They found that properties that were smaller properties assessed below 3 million, 2 million pay more per square foot, and that's sort of typical because it's typically smaller. So smaller properties tend to have higher values, assessed values per square foot, therefore higher taxes per square foot. So then a larger properties because of the sort of somewhat economies of scale there. And trying to provide some relief for small business. There's been a lot of talk about that, and the pandemic has sort of accentuated all of that because we've all seen a lot of the bigger box stores being able to stay open, and some of the smaller businesses having to shut down due to government regulation, et cetera. So there's been a lot of discussion about that, and the city's trying to accommodate small business and trying to help them out, but it's a very difficult proposition given an ad valorem tax system which is based on value, and a lot of small business are located in large properties but occupy a small space and pay rent. So hard to provide relief on the tax side there for them. But I'm going to present you three options that were presented to council at yesterday's council meeting. There was three options. The first one and this program, one of the first programs that I'm showing you here, the commercial assessment averaging program, is going to happen. It already has been approved by council. Council had to seek approval from the province to implement this, which they got. So they are moving ahead with this, and this is going to happen next fiscal year for their next 22-23 fiscal year. So you should see this on next year's tax bill or an assessment cycle coming through. Below is a bit of the timeline of when it should be implemented. So there's a lot of work going behind the scenes on their accounting side and whatnot. But the crux of it is to be eligible for this. Basing this on 21 like known information. So last year the average increase in commercial tax rates was about a little less than 2%, or I think it was 2% for HRM or somewhere around that. So to qualify for the program, your assessment would have to go up by more than 5% over the commercial tax base increase. You'd have to be located in a zone which is serviced by water and sewer, and your assessment would have to go up by that threshold. So the example on the screen here, for example, let's say the threshold would be established every year based on what the average assessment increase was for the base for the year. So assuming it was 2, and this property went up, so the threshold is 2 plus 5, that's 7. So this assessment went up by 7.6% between 21 and 22. It automatically qualifies for the increase for the program. So it went up from you're seeing the market value went up from 1 million to 1.3. That's the $300,000 increase. That 300,000 will be split, like phased over for the next 3 years. So the taxable value for the first 21 year will be 1.1 million instead of the 1.3. The second year 1.2, and in the third year, the full assessment, the taxable and the assessed value will be the same. So you'll pay tax on the full value in year 3. So instead of currently, if your value goes up by 7.6%, you're paying that 7.6% increase in the value on your tax bill when the city sets the tax rate in September. So the city gets the full increase in the assessment and on the tax rate right away. Here I'll give you an example. If the assessment goes up by the 1.3 again for the first 3 years, then the next year it goes up by another 100 or by another 300 or another amount the following years. You can see here the phase in the following year, we get phase in for another 3 years, and then in year 3 another. If it goes up by another 450,000, it'd be split over 3 years. So if your assessment constantly goes up by more than the threshold for consecutive years, well, it's always going to be phased in. So the phasing in just gets extended as years go by. So you automatically benefit from it. You don't have to apply, it's automatically done. And that's just for your commercial assessments. And here, if your assessment doesn't go up by the threshold, well, you below the 7%, well, you pay the tax based on that assessment. So next slide. So here, I'm going to talk to you about reform and that form is on assessment, and that's going to go ahead. The council has approved that. That's going ahead, and that should be implemented next year. So here, in addition to those changes, the city is trying to help out small business on property taxes, and that's the harder head scratcher here. I mean, it's hard to provide, and they've got 3 options. They had like 15, 20 options. They whittled it down to 3. Council yesterday, out of the 3 options, staff was recommending option 2. Council thought that wasn't enough, and therefore tabled it and pushed it back to another council meeting where consultation where they could have consultation from the greater public. So they haven't made up their minds on this. So these 3 options are theoretically still on the table. First option here, you might not know this, but in the city there's a number of bids or business improvement districts in the town, and on the right of your screen you're seeing all of them here in HRM, and these are small geographical areas, mostly concentrated on the peninsula in Halifax, a few in Dartmouth, and one in Porter's Lake there. So these small areas or business improvement districts, they've got staff and they've got a group of business interests, and the idea is to provide relief to them because there's small businesses in these little small districts. So the idea here would be, well, if you look at the chart on your left based on 21 data, this is what, like, for the properties where the city has square footage information, is that if you look at the taxes properties pay on a per square foot basis, well, the average is the green line there, $3.12 a square foot. So the idea would be to provide relief for any of the bids that are above that average. So in this case would be Downtown Halifax bid, the Sackville bid, and the Quinpool Road and Spring Garden area bids, and those would get a reduced tax rate of 50%. That be applied to the properties within those small geographical areas. But the problem is it doesn't help small businesses that are outside of those bids, and doesn't help small business that are in the other business improvement districts. So staff's not favoring this option too much. Next slide. The next slide, which was the option that was recommended by staff to council, is a scheme where assessed values that are below $1 million would get taxed at a certain rate. Anything at $1 million and $2 million would be taxed or between $1 million and $3 million would be taxed at a slightly 30 cents lower rate, and then anything over $3 million would be taxed higher. So the arrow here shows 2.953 on a percent, 2.953%. That's the tax rate in 21, not assuming any of these changes are implemented. This is meant to be a revenue neutral scheme. So the idea is that you decrease the rate for assessments that are below 3 million, 15 cents for below $1 million, 30 cents lower for assessment between $1 million and 3 million, or the second million, and anything above that, it's got to be taxed higher than if there was no tiering involved, right? So this would get recalculated every year based on the assessment base that the city has to work with. So this is just giving you an example of the difference in taxation. So if you have a property assessed below 3 million, you certainly pay less tax. If you have an assessment above 5 million, for example, you'll certainly pay a lot more tax. So some of the higher valued properties would have to shoulder the benefit that the city is given to lower assessed value. So this would apply to, like, if you have a property that's assessed below $1 million, well, you'd pay 2.8% on the middle row. If you have a property that's 2 million, well, the first million would be 2.8%. The second million would be 2.653%. And after that, you'd pay 3.103%. So that's the sort of scheme that was recommended by staff. But like I said earlier, council doesn't think it's enough. And quite frankly, it's not going to move the needle that much. I mean, it is a difference, but council wants to discuss this a lot more. So they're looking for feedback. And then finally, the third zone, the third option is implementing this tiering that I just mentioned here. Move on to this next slide there, James. And also implementing zones as well to this. And so if you look at the chart that I have here, the first part, when you look at business parks, well, that's everything in purple that you see here, like the Bedford Industrial Park, Dartmouth Crossing, City of Lakes, and Bayers Lake Business Park. Those would be theoretically taxed at a higher rate on those zones. Also, and also the tiering would kick in as well, and they be taxed at a higher rate based on the geographical area that they fall into. Then the next zone after that would be high density, and that's the orange zone that you see on the peninsula downtown, which is the downtown bid actually, would be taxed at a higher rate if you're in that geographical area. And then followed by that would be industrial, everything you see in blue. So that would be City of Lake, or I mean the Burnside, all of Burnside's park. That impacts you guys quite a bit. Woodside Industrial Park, Ragged Lake, Atlantic Acres, those would tax at a slightly higher rate than if none of this was applied before. And think about the 2.953 is the current tax rate there. So that's your benchmark, and anything in red that I see here gets taxed higher. Anything in green in the box of table 4 here would get taxed lower, and everything in black would be about the same as it was if no scheme and no zones were applied at all. So obviously this is not a favorable a scheme for you for the GBBA at all, because part of your members that are in Dartmouth Crossing and City of Lakes would be the highest tax rate out of all the zones in HRM, and and the majority of your members in the industrial zone would pay the third highest or higher zone than anything in high density and in the rest of it. So small medium enterprise, like that's everything else that you see in green across the map here. But council is not too much in favor of this. I listened to the council meeting yesterday, and this is probably not going to fly, having these zones. But some councillors did talk about it and are in favor of it. Some aren't. So I just don't see it flying based on my interpretation. From some of the older people in the audience, I mean, it brings back the amalgamation of HRM when different Dartmouth was taxed at different rates than HRM or Halifax, etc., and it brings back old memories. So I don't think it's gonna fly. I've also heard a lot about increase in property tax next year. The city's talking about it. We've all heard in the media. We've heard a number of tax rates going up, tax bill going up 5.9% next year. Well, we have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt, in that the city looks at the average tax bill when they're saying that. So there's two things that make your tax bill go up: a higher assessment and an increase in the tax rate. The assessment, you can appeal it; the tax rate, you cannot. So when the city's doing their budget, they just got the roll release Monday this week, so we've all seen the increase. That's probably more than what they were expecting. So the actual tax rate's not going to go up by 5.9%. the assessment is going to go up, and then the tax rate it wants to go up. So the city wants. Last year they were sort of panicking. They didn't want to increase the rate. A lot of capital projects got tabled. A lot of their costs are going up too because of inflationary pressures that we all heard of as well. So this year is a year they want to get moving with their agenda, capital projects. They've got a lot of collective agreements that are coming to term that they have to honor. RCMP has increased costs, et cetera, and policing, et cetera. So there's a lot of initiatives that they've sort of put on ice during COVID, and now want to put into fruition. The table 2 that you're seeing on your screen shows a bit on the top tier is your residential sort of increase in the taxation and assessment, and the below is your commercial base. Now, the commercial base, because the commercial base will not increase as much as the residential, because the values for residential is going up. The commercial tax basis, which was what we're focused on here today, would be subject to a higher tax rate increase than residential. So at the moment, with the numbers the city is contemplating with assessment projections, the tax rate might go up by a little less than 1%, while on the commercial side it would go up by quite a bit more. We're looking at like on the residential side going up by 0.7%, while on the commercial side the tax would go up by 5.7%, because the assessment base is not that much. So even though your assessment would stay the same, you'd still be looking at if this all goes if this goes through, you'd be looking at a tax bill of 5.7% higher if this budget goes forward. But they're going to use they now have the published values for 2022, so they're going to factor that into their budget talks. They're still not finalized, so we'll see where that ends up. But our firm tracks, as you can see on the chart that James is presenting here, charts the relationship between the residential tax rate and the commercial tax rate in the largest cities in the country here. You see the light blue bar here is the average of all the cities. Halifax last year was at 2.85, 2 bars over on your right. If this goes through, assuming all the other tax rates stay the same, well, the disparity between commercial taxes and residential taxes will be even higher in Halifax and going the wrong way in our view. So there's always been a disparity in commercial tax paying more than residential. Obviously, commercial owners in the city have less votes than residential, so there's certainly pressures there. And it's always been the case, commercial pays more than residential. But something to look out for your members is that the disparity would push higher. And another thing we've noticed on the provincial side, the new elected conservative government, typically puts out ministerial orders. The premier puts this out to all their department ministers, sort of their action plan over their electoral term. And here I'm giving you an excerpt of the ministerial order to the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board, and I can't believe that this is not getting more traction. So you see highlighted in yellow there on your screens, the province wants to implement an additional transfer tax amount for non-residents. Currently, Nova Scotia is one of the highest. I think we believe we pay 1.25% in transfer tax. They're thinking about increasing that for non-residents when we buy property as an additional tax. And the other point, which is very substantial there, is implementing a 2% tax rate to non-residents that have property in Nova Scotia, and it hasn't had too much media attention over the last little while, but I can't believe it hasn't done so. It would be quite an increase in taxes for sure. For example, in Halifax, about 3.1%, the commercial tax rate. Well, if you add 2% to that, you're at 5.2%. In Sydney, the commercial tax rate is already 5%. You add 2% to that, it would be 7%. So for non-residents, that's quite a hit there, and wouldn't promote development and ownership for non-residents. And quite frankly, I personally don't agree with it, or our firm doesn't agree with it too much. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the business community wouldn't either. So something to look out for. And this is sort of where we outline all the remarks here in terms of our recommendations. You know, we think assessment averaging that's going ahead is a good thing, but we think that new construction should not be included in that. For example, if you've got a piece of land, you're building a building, well, that usually right now, the city would get that windfall from that added value by building a building on a piece of land. If new construction is included in the assessment averaging, the city will only get full value on that in 3 years, because that increase in assessment would get phased in over 3 years. We think that should be excluded so that it doesn't fall on the backs of the rest of the commercial tax base that doesn't have new construction. We think that should be excluded. So we'll see if HRM accepts our recommendation. We think that the tax rates, the disparity between commercial and residential, should be kept to a minimum and not have that discrepancy. And something I haven't talked about, but the residential cap program that's currently established for owner-occupied single-family homes. You know, there's a value for your assessed value, and then the cap value, and that cap value is subject to inflation. So your tax bill only goes up with inflation, and that's taken away. That's not benefiting who it was intended to benefit more than 14 years ago. A lot of people that stay in their property benefit from the cap, while people buying property or newcomers to the market, etc., don't get the cap right away, and it doesn't benefit them, or the cap's removed. So we think GBBA should lobby against that, and of course against the municipal orders to increase the transfer tax and non-resident tax. In my view, is bad policy, doesn't promote investment, etc. So that's it for I believe that's it. James, next slide. Yes.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you very much again for going over that. And sorry everyone, my figuring out some of these Zoom things, I will say, has been a bit of an interesting process. I wanted to obviously thank Navin and Mathieu Maillet for the great presentation materials that they've provided. I also really wanted to put a big thank you to Pam McFarland, to Audrey, and to Keith for helping set all this up. I know as far as all of this Zoom is going, Keith was really instrumental in showing us how to do everything. So if any of the members are looking to present different things, I'd highly recommend talking with them. They're a great group to deal with. So there's been a lot of material that's been covered. I think everybody, I think all the members on here, should be intrigued about some of the reform coming. Should be interested to see how their assessments come out, and kind of what taxes they'll be paying. So one of the things we kind of wanted to come up with here is we did another little poll here, just to kind of see, after all of this information that you've heard, do you think now that you would appeal your 2022 assessment, given the fact that we may be looking at increased tax rates if council does move forward with that? As Mathieu mentioned, in regards to assessment averaging, getting it on the lower end, they could have some interesting dilemmas there. and then also obviously, the tiered zones. So I think most of the member base here is either in Burnside, or I think Pam and Keith may have mentioned that there's some parties here from the Sackville Business Association as well. So if some of those tiered zones did come in, you could be looking at increased rates. So it is always important to kind of understand your assessments there. So we'll just kind of leave this poll open for another quick second here. I just did want to remind everybody on our last poll that about 56% of you said that you were impacted by COVID. I think it's important to note that even if your business wasn't impacted by COVID, COVID has obviously changed and impacted the whole landscape. So the question really needs to be made, while my business may not have been impacted, does it impact everybody else? And if the answer is yes, then you should be looking at your assessment, and you should be talking to council to ensure that there are steps being made to ensure that taxes are being handled correctly, and that you are getting relief for something that has been severely impacted. So we'll end this poll right here. We got about 6 of you coming through, so I guess most of you are probably hoping to get to lunch right now and move off of this. But 67% of you said that you would appeal your 2022 property tax assessment. So, always definitely something you can do there. I wanted to see, it doesn't look like we have any Q&As. I can kind of.
Yes, in the chat, James, there's one from Anne Louise again.
Okay. Should I keep you on? Okay. Okay, so Anne Louise, we've got another one for you here. Sorry if I can't bring this up here. Do we know
when council?
Do we know when council has deferred the property tax tier system so that businesses impacted by such a proposal can voice to council? There are many small businesses struggling with these proposed areas for tax increases, and it appears they're being overlooked by option 3. Sue Utech indicates option 3 was wanted. Can she expand on that? And then Sue Utech has commented option 3 was seen as a compromise. Every bid would be seen as a small decrease. Obviously option 1, a 19% decrease would be great for Spring Garden, but it's never going to be great to the floor. So as a question here, are we, I guess Matthew,
Sue is correct in that the option 3, like I mentioned in my presentation, like the whole discussion has been tabled or deferred for a further meeting with expanded input from residents and whatnot. So they want to discuss this further next year. Averaging, she's correct, is going to happen next fiscal 2023-24, I should say. She's right there, not 20. We're dealing right now, we're in 22-23. So but averaging is happening next year, and then after that, there was some discussion of trying to bring in relief sooner for small business, but there's been some hesitancy from staff there to bring this in at the same time as averaging, worried that it couldn't happen. But all of this is tabled, and option 3 with the zones is talked about and is wanted by some councillors and some people or some of the tax base for sure. But looking at Burnside and looking at the zones, that the last map that was made available, that wouldn't benefit you guys at all. So obviously everybody looking at their own interest, it would benefit some and not benefit others. Certainly, if you're going to incorporate geographical zones, there'll be winners and losers. Currently, what I've seen in the zones like that they're proposing, and none of this is etched in stone or anything, but Burnside would be a loser in those zones as far as I can tell. So there'll be winners, but and the different property owners would would look at where their property is situated and try to see if they're a winner or a loser based on the tax scheme, and it can be done, but everybody's going to be looking at their own interests. So
Awesome. Well,
I believe I think I'm answering Anne Louise's question there, and that I personally I don't agree with any zones. It pegs different geographical areas against each other, and it was theoretically push development in different zones that would seek lower taxes. Perhaps it's never a good thing in my view when we look at zones. But the tiered assessment thing that is typically done, is already in place in other jurisdictions. And at council yesterday, there was talk about having an application program where small businesses, based on a certain qualifier, could apply to get an actual grant or a relief. And that seems like, in theory, it seems to be the better option to get a bigger bang for the buck there. But there's added cost and logistics and legalities in qualifying that, because then you have to get into, well, what qualifies a small business? What's your income? Some small business, like, you know, there's certain practical issues there that would certainly be that are a roadblock to that. But council is really digging their heels into this and trying to come up with a solution for sure.
Thank you very much for that, and I wanted to thank everybody again for their attention today. I think we're just about 2 minutes over the hour here, so I wanted to really thank all the members for listening to us and for all your great questions, comments, and for participating with the polls. We certainly appreciate that. We hope you've taken some information from this session and you know, and applied that maybe to some of your business practices. If you do ever have any questions, like I said earlier, all of our emails are below, and we'll try and get the slide deck out to the member base after the presentation at some point. Feel free to give us a call. Feel free, we're
James,
happy to chat.
There's another question that came up, I see there on the Q&A, that account is asking, should the BBA write their concerns to council over the next 60 days? And obviously I'd say yes, because those meetings will take place sooner rather than later. There's talk at council that it could be tabled at a next council meeting next month. So certainly GBBA should make their voice heard on those options for sure.
Okay, I just have an announcement about future events. I want to thank everyone, all the Altus Group panelists. Sorry, I've lost my video feed. A lot of information was provided, but we do have a recording of this webinar, and we will link that on the GBBA website tomorrow. I'd also like to acknowledge some of the GBBA board members attending this webinar, which is Dee DeVille, the chair of GBBA, Audrey Wombold, the vice chair, Jan McCauley on our finance team, and Keith A. Walt on our membership team. Thanks for attending. I'd also like to thank again Keith McKay, who was our Zoom tech on this call, and let everyone know that the next GBBA event is an in-person luncheon on Thursday, January 20th. It's at the Best Western Plus on Spectacle Lake Drive. The speakers are from Dalhousie University, discussing the benefit of hiring co-op students and interns and the grants and funding that's available for that. Registration is open on the events tab of greaterburnside.com. Also, Discover Halifax is again promoting the Dine Around program, and a link to that can also be found on the GBBA website. Thanks everyone for attending today. We'll see you again.